Hello. Hey, with fall here and new forages that are going to be coming in, we thought we would just bring in some samples of new forages and go through that process. Kurt's here with me, and we're just going to go through and bring a couple in and talk them through as we would normally go through. So I've already downloaded a couple from different labs, and I'm just going to go to import. I'm going to import the feed analysis. And then I'm going to go ahead and just grab this standard analysis right here. And you can see that I'm bringing in the XML standard analysis. This is what is called a high dollar bunch of alfalfa hay here. And so what I'm going to choose is to clone this during the process. Of course, we always have to do this. Edit feed info during import allows me just to change the name. I'm going to open that feed in a new tab when we're done, just so we can look at it and talk about it. And then the sample date will be the date that is associated with the new sample. So I'm going to jump over. This is all set up. I'm going to go ahead and proceed. It's imported from CVS. Okay, proceed. I'm going to go ahead and replace the existing feed. And this is what the lab had given me back. So it looked like they did a nice NIR report with the 312240 right here. And this is the interesting part, is that the ANDFOM, it's, Western alfalfa with a 30 ANDFOM, crude protein of 22. So I'm going to let it pre-select this alfalfa hay. When we let this pre-selection occur, then what the computer will do is it'll go out and grab the things that it says it's most like. And I'm going to use the CNCPS feed bank on alfalfa hay. Everything else, I usually unclick this and it brings in the rumen feed library, but I think I'll bring in the CNCPS on an alfalfa hay since we have lower NDFs in the Cornell feed library than we do in the rumen feed library. So I'm going to use this. This is going to download this analysis over the top of that template. So I can hit either orange spot. I could hover over this and see what it looks like. I'm going to like it. I'm going to click this. And what it does is it tells me the name of this, and I'm just going to go ahead and put in there demo. Just to rename it, alfalfa hay and 2022 11. And usually a good thing to do is to make sure that that personal name sometimes is used on the printout. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that's the same. I'm going to save it. Now remember, I ask it to open up to show us this feed. So Kurt, tell me what you think about this alfalfa hay.
Well, the first look is it's pretty good, high quality, high protein, not much. ADF and NDF are very similar, so it's certainly not something I see out here in the East. The question I was going to ask is there an option where to save this? How does the program know where you're saving this to?
I will show you. Well, I can back out of that right now. So now when it's completed like this, and I'll say close, so it goes into our main feed library. You do have an option to go ahead and put that in, and what it'll do is it'll put it in according to the test day. So here it is down here. If I remembered, I called it demo, and so there it is, demo al hay 2211. I do have the option too in some of the settings to associate with a farm right away, but I chose not to do that.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead. I closed it. I'm going to go ahead and open it again, so it'll open up in the feed tab. And here you go, your 22
Yeah.
30. I'm assuming you want to go here.
Yeah, I was going to say, I usually get a little more anxious and jump right to the constants page. Look
All
at the
right.
fiber. Yep, looks good. Curious on the digestibility values that we got
Oh,
from
the
the
NDF
lab.
digestibility.
Yeah,
Okay, so they didn't have a 12, but we have a 48, 51, 53.
okay, that looks like a pretty typical high quality alfalfa in terms of protein anyway. A lot of UNDF in that fraction, but what little NDF is there is pretty fast.
Yeah, so I think this is the problem with guys in the West is we see that 30, total NDF in this sample, but when you look at it, your fast pool is extremely fast. Slow pool's okay, but there's such a big no pool. And this is an
Hmm.
interesting graph is that, by the end of the day, this animal is still just seeing over 50% of that NDF being digested, basically leaves, right?
She's got to get that out. So depending on particle size, how well it was processed, and how further particles get reduced, and or whether or not it's sortable in the TMR or out of the TMR.
Yeah, the other thing that's really interesting and, is most of us don't change this value. So what
Hmm.
is the PENDF value for that forage? And it is 85% if you're feeding it as baled long stem. But we've taken some of that and shook it out. And if you throw it in a mixer, especially at, this dry matter, really a dry sample, really low
Hmm.
NDF, it becomes leaves and twigs pretty quick, and it's broken down really fast.
Yeah.
So, that's our high our high relative feed value alfalfa. The fact that, you know, Peter Van Soest did his, lignin times 2.4 to calculate UNDF. And you can see when he used alfalfa, that really worked well. And that's what he used to come up with his lignin times 2.4 to predict UNDF.
Yeah. Interesting. So um, I'm more familiar with feeding alfalfa for its peptides and protein fractions, and which is related to the NDFD. So most of those proteins are in the leaf tissue.
And so this has been something we've done quite a while was make sure your B2 fraction is equal to the
Right.
B3
Fiber.
digestion. Yeah. But, pretty good source of protein, but
Yep.
digestibility. So this would not do us great uh, things as far as, you know, total digestion of all that 30 NDF. Again, we can look at some, you know, minerals here.
Yeah. What was the ash content?
Good question. Go to quick data entry. That ash content was, 12.9, 13%. So got a little
Yeah.
high on them. And I'm thinking that's probably um, fourth or fifth cutting out there, which probably laid for a while. They picked it up with a big merger.
Mm.
So some of those ensiled or wilted products may be kind of high there.
Yeah. Could be a little ground
All
or
right.
just dry winds
What do
blowing
you think
dust around.
about doing another one? Shall we do another one?
Sure thing. Let's
All right.
bring in.
Well, let's go to corn silage. I think it was this one here. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and proceed. Same options here. And what we're going to do is bring that in. Now, oh, this is interesting. So, NIR analysis here, basically showing that, we kind of have a mass balance. so people could scream and yell, hey, the lab's got a mistake or something, but you're asking them to do an NIR analysis with silage acids up in here on a wet product and then dry it down and give us all the values. So I don't get too excited about that. I can come down and I can manipulate the ash or look at the starch or the NDF if I know my sample, I know where we took it from. So this time I would unclick the CNCPS, let the pre-selection go ahead and choose. So I've got a 38 with a 34 and a 40 starch. So here I've got a 35-35 with a 38 to 40 starch. And the rumen library gives you a lot better choice on corn silages and stuff. So I may choose this one. And again, if you don't want the pre-selection, then what you need to do is go in here and type what forage you have, corn silage, and then you can make that decision. I'm going to let it pre-select that and take that out of there. And there's my 35, 35, 39. And so I'm going to choose that. This thing will override any values here. So you always need to clone over the top of something. I'm going to go ahead, demo corn silage.
I see you chose medium on the particle size length. Do you ever go for the fine or the large?
I'll change the PENDF, and that's the whole thing, when we start talking about that one little area, it's almost like, we'd really like to know whoever sees that silage should be the one that change that silage. Because I just feel like, those are some physical values that I'm not sure those guys know what we're seeing and what we're doing.
Right.
If you knew that, you can go in there, you can change. We'll go through that. I'm going to save this now. It's our demo corn silage. It's going to be thrown into our main library. And so right now, here it is. Now you could actually, Kurt, go down to classifications, and then it's telling me this is a silage with a corn, and I can change the physical form right here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm going to choose not to do that, but you can. Okay, so here it is. It's a drier corn silage 38, NDF 34. Starch is crazy high. That starch value uh, right here of 40.
Mm-hmm.
And it corrected the mass balance when we brought it in because it was not a large adjustment. So it would take down the silage acids as the first parameter. And since it was only off 1%, it didn't have a problem. But let me go to constant calculations and talk me through this.
Well, just going down the top quadrant there, total carbs at 84, NDF or AM organic matter 34. Those values look good. PE, NDF. So the 76 represents the PEF factor, the portion of dry matter of the forage material larger than 4 millimeters, using that Penn State box with the updated sieve. UNDF, looks like we made a good choice to be using the digestibility numbers rather than the lignin numbers, because we do have quite a difference in the proportion or the amount of U based on the digestibility, not just the lignin. We got 4 units difference of undigestible fiber in there, which is going to make our digestible pool much smaller.
Yeah, 23 and a half instead of
Yeah,
27 and a half. That's significant.
that's a chunk.
Yeah. All right, let me go to, let me bounce over to the NDF digestibility real quick. So I chose not sorry, I should have shown you that, but I chose not to import that 7-hour starch. So
Yeah.
I will physically go change my 7-hour. I think we've got
Well,
another sample I can show you doing that later.
I forget. Is this year's crop, or is this something that's been fermented for a year?
This year's.
Okay. Wow. Yeah,
Uh,
definitely. We got to bring that down.
I chose to see the the sample date as the date here. So that was
Yeah.
at 10/27/22. So, you know, with the dry matter at 38 and the NDF at 34 in the starch, Hermano's recommendation would be 23. And
For the
what?
starch KD. Yeah.
Yeah, what I could do is just grab this and pull it right over there.
The other thing, yeah. So I see that he's got red values there for NDS recommendations. One of the other things for people to keep an eye on is looking at the small intestinal digestibility of that is actually lower as well.
Yeah, and I think as like you were talking, as we talked before, if this stuff stays in, you know, a good amount of lactic acid, the idea is this would be more available, right? As time goes
Hmm.
on.
Yeah, those prolamine proteins around the starch granules slowly degrade,
Yeah.
being steeped in the acid.
So I'm going to go look at NDF. And so this one did have a 12, 30, 120, 240. And so when we look down through this, we
Mm,
can see fast, slow, no pool. Um, I still like this graph
gosh.
here. So out of the 38 total NDF, or sorry, 34.2 here it is, the animal will actually get, somewhere around here, 22.5 of the 34.
Hmm.
So definitely not a BMR and grown in this area of the country where I am. It probably would be, a normal digestibility corn silage.
I was going to say I didn't want to bash it too bad, but it looks like just an average quality corn. And I know we're recording this in November, and I've been receiving a number of questions of, hey, what variety should I grow next year, and so forth, which, I know this corn needs to fully ferment, and the starches need to become fully available. But in these decisions, the question is, do you want fiber digestibility? Do you want starch digestibility? Try to get both. What grows well in your agronomic conditions? Like I say, this corn looks average. It's middle of the road, but
It's pretty
then
high
inventory
starch, isn't it?
purposes,
Yeah.
that's high starch. It looks like it was fully matured, fully set. Is
Yeah.
the starch set?
And I think maybe somebody was doing a grain corn as their variety for corn silage.
Maybe.
One thing I didn't do, was I should have probably, I think we have one more sample we'll fly through quickly, but I choose not to import the 7-hour starch. But if there was a number in there, you can see when it gets typed in, you'll get some number in here. And
Yep.
again, that's on another video that basically not sure what those numbers mean because the lab does the 7-hour starch digestibility on dried ground samples, and that's not what the corn silage comes in as. So if there is a number in here, I reset it and take the data out of there. And then I go back in here and I'll choose something close to where he's at, or something, if I go through and I see the silage, look at the silage, know the dairy. That's the best way of doing that.
Yep. Yep.
So couple more run throughs here. Okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to pull that other sample here. I'm going to do a sorghum silage, and this was kind of a from a feed yard, but I think I can go through the same thing again. Standard analysis. There's a couple things I don't use here. Add farm to the feed name. So apparently you could put in there the farm name in the feed name. Sometimes it's not listed on the bag or the sample. So I always want to list it with what I want anyway. So anyway, what I'm going to do is proceed on this one, bring this in. And here they didn't do the 7-hour starch on this, so we'll be okay. But again, just a fast, I'm going to click off here. I'm going to get, a silage here that's 33 on a 31 with an NDF of 47. And my NDF is 44.5, crude protein of 10, and we're right here. So I'm going to go ahead and take this one, and if I wanted to non-select, I can go over here and type in sorghum and come up with a sample here and choose one of the samples here. And so maybe more similar to this. Again, I'll pre-select and let it take the analysis, and I'm going to go ahead and just bring that one in. Here's our sample. I need to make sure I remember what this is. And from Dairyland Labs, save that, and it pops open here. Again, what we looked at was 31 dry matter, protein, NDF. We did run the same kind of rates on there, so you can see it's calculated 14.1 instead of the lignin times 2.4, which was going to say that the UNDF was a lot smaller than the measured
Yeah,
value.
that's a big one.
Yeah, so it lowers the potentially digested from 36.2 to 30.8. So,
Mm.
and again, then if we did some 7-hour starch here, we could look at that number. There's 14%. This being this wet and having fed sorghum silage before, those BBs, the drier it gets, the more resistant it is to digestion, especially if you're feeding it to something with a high dry matter intake. Passage rate increases, but in feed yards and heifer growth, this would be a wonderful product. Usually pretty good sugar load. So I'm going to close that. And Kurt, we're going to grab one more. And I think this is where I wanted to do. So we're using a lot of straw in these diets. And so what I wanted to do was say, okay, I'm going to use this as a sample. We're getting a little long in our recording, but I just want to go through some other processes with you. I'm going to bring this in, and this is not necessarily, this lab or this farm's sample, but what I do is want to step through some processes. So it's
Mm-hmm.
imported from Dairyland Labs. I'm going to go, and instead of bringing it and choosing a sample to bring it on, I'm going to do a resample on it.
Oh, neat.
I'm going to choose which farm that is and say proceed. So now I can go down to the straw. Here is the straw that I want to do, and I want to do a moving. If I do nothing here, what it will do is take this sample and throw it on top of that saved analysis. So we'll have one analysis overriding the other analysis. And listening to all the gurus and everybody, what we need an average of multiple samples. So if I look at my samples for these three farms, they're not necessarily related, but for the example, the dry matter's 85, 84, 88. The crude protein, again, here's an outlier in the fact that that was a little higher, but most of these are, here's a really low one, here's a high one. Again, we're talking about straw. So in the NDF digestibility area, we want to see the 12, the 30, 120, 240. And what I want to do is show that. So what I might do is, out of this sample, I'm going to do a simple moving average of all three. So when I take that protein of 4,6,8,4,2,4, that average is going to be around 5, which is believable for me. 4 might be better, but what I'm going to
So,
do is I'm going to let it run. Go ahead.
yeah. So, Dave, that column average is based on what you select on how you want to weight your
Yes.
analyses. Okay.
And a simple is 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. A
Yeah.
weighted is 50 because it's weighted to the last sample. 50, 33, 16. Exponential gives us even more weight to the last sample, 57, 28, 14.
Gotcha.
So again, if this was an upright silo, you might want to do this.
Hmm.
But I'm just showing the keystrokes here. So, and again, you could unclick any of these values here, and the other way to do this too is here's an ash value that's just skyrocketed here. So maybe I
Mm.
don't even believe this sample. So I'm going to take it out of the run and just get a moving average of the last 2 samples from here and here. And I kind of believe that a little better, so I'm not even going to include this one here. So then I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to simple average these last two 50-50, proceed. It's going to crank through and it's going to say, what are you going to call this? And I'm going to say demo straw 2022-11. And delete all this and make sure that this is and save this and it'll pop open here and we'll just review this real quick. Again, we've looked at this. There's a real cool little function over here. You see this patchwork quilt here and you can go to samples and you can look at all 3. And of course, here's the 2 we used. That's over at that sample nutrient data entry. This is the value, but this is the interesting part is looking at those constant calculations. And, straw became the Goldilocks. And, I'm not even sure where this value comes in, but a lot of that PENDF on that ground straw is not going to be 95. It's going to be 65 or 70
Yeah.
after we measured some of them through the Z box and the pin box.
Yeah.
But the lignin times 2.4 was going to say 20% of that sample is not digestible. When we measured, it's 31. So we do have a rate and a potentially digested NDF pool of 44 instead of 54.
Yeah, that's big.
Yeah. So the idea is this is more of a manure pusher than a manure maker, right? And that's that's the reason we're looking for gut fill on dry cows and close-up cows.
Yeah. Yeah. Metamucil.
So what we were trying to do today was just go through and show new forages brought in, 2 or 3 different ways of doing that. Um, you know, how to import your sample and then how to resample and just look at a few key values. So Kurt, any closing thoughts?
Uh, Really powerful tool to evaluate forages as they come in. Take the time. I know it's a lot easier rather than hand entering anymore, but still take some time and review those analyses and make sure they fit properly within your feed.
All right, with that, we'll close and thanks for watching the recording. I hope it was helpful.